Hey guys, Levi here with Trident Fly Fishing, and today we're going to be tying a sex dungeon. It's a big streamer pattern developed by Kelly Galloup. It just plain works. Kind of lengthy fly to tie, but it's really not all that difficult. We'll get started right now. In the vise we have a Daiichi 2461 hook. This one is a size 2. We're going to finish it with a size 1/0, a little bigger, and we'll lay a thread base down first, and we're using Vivas. This is the 100 denier. You kind of need to use Vivas for this. It's just gonna spin some deer hair, and this stuff is really powerful. So let's get started with 2 marabou plumes. So whenever you pick out your marabou plumes for the tail here, we're gonna use 2 plumes, and for this I like to choose the nice feathers that when you pull the tips together, it's nice and straight right here. That's a good looking feather, and that'll swim really well in the water. And we're gonna need 2 of those. So go ahead and select 2 that have the same look to them. You want them to have very similar qualities. As you can see, these 2 plumes look really similar to one another, and that'll make them lay nicely on top of one another and will prevent your fly from looking amiss in the tail. So once you select 2 feathers, let's go ahead in there and just get rid of these bottom fibers. Those are gonna make everything difficult to work with, and you don't need all of that in there. And you also see how once I strip that out, everything's tapers to the same length and the same end there. So do that to both feathers, and then we'll tie them in. All right, here they are. Just stack them on top of one another. And measure your tail to be about the length of the hook shank here. I'm okay with that. Spin your thread if you need to tighten it up, and you can just cinch that right in. And for the first one of these, I'll just go ahead and wind that all the way up. Build yourself some body, and then you can clip that out of the way. And from there, we're gonna do the exact same thing with another feather. Strip those ends off, measure it out to be about the same length, and then we'll tie it in and add some flash on the sides. Get it nice and even. Pinch wrap that in. And we'll actually go ahead, and it's a big fly, so we could just wrap this up as well. Tighten it up and get that out of the way. All right, now that we have our marabou tied in, let's move into some holographic silver flash. Put a strand or 2 on each. I don't like a whole lot of flash in these, but you guys can do however you like. Flash wise, I just tend to sparsely add it in there. Got a real flashy body on this fly as well, so you can count on some flash there. Tie that in on the side nearest to you, and then we will fold it over onto the other side. Yep. Nice even flash on both sides. And from here, let's just clean this body up before we start to dub and tie in feathers. Once we get our tail section done, we'll move into some ultra wire. This is size small in the color copper. Just go right ahead and tie it in right at the top of the fly. And when you tie this in, just bend that back, tie that into. That way you won't have to worry about this coming loose. And when you get wire, tend to give yourself enough to work with. You know, it's appealing to be frugal, but you don't want that to be too short to where you're dealing with a lot. And tie that in. We're gonna move into some hackle. And you can use schloppen, or you can use just strung neck or strung Chinese hackle. That's what I'm using for this, and this just happens to be a bunch that has a nice variety to it. So you can see we have some webby fibers on some of these bigger feathers, which are gonna be great for the front portion of the fly, but for the rear portion, we're looking for something a little less webby and a little smaller. We don't need these really long fibers. We'll go with this feather. Yeah, a little smaller. This one looks good. And this fly can be a bear to work with. And if you don't want to deal with all of that trouble, we sell these for $7, $8 on tridentflyfishing.com. So you can find a variety of colors there and it'll save you the time at the vise. But if you're one of those people who likes to tie your own flies, keep on watching this video because we're gonna go through everything needed. So once you have your feather selected, go ahead and tie it in right back here with the shiny side facing you. And I tend to just palm or hackle like this. I like it better than tying it in at the eye. That way you tie it in on both ends. But if you are one of those guys who likes to tie it in at the eye and then wrap it with the wire to secure it, that works totally fine. I just tend to like it this way a little better. Alright, so now that we have everything tied in here, we'll move into some ice dub. This is in the color olive. Add some flash here, just apply it straight to our thread. If you like to use a dubbing loop, that's totally fine right now too, to build up some bulk. So actually advance your thread to the front of this fly. Make sure you're there. So we'll wrap this back once and then forward once again as well so that we have that bulk built up. This is a big fly. Good scalping pattern. Alright, so just wind that, and if you have a rotary vise, you can let it shine right now. Apply more dubbing as needed. Alrighty. Now we'll work this right back up. And if you haven't noticed, this back portion of the fly is essentially a woolly bugger with some rubber legs. So it doesn't need to be more complicated than it actually is. I know this fly looks like it's a lot, but it's once you break it down, it's not that much to work with. Alright, so get your dubbing taken care of there. We'll add just a wee bit more. And we'll finish off this head right here. Alright. Now that we have our body dubbed, just palmer this forward. Sweep the fibers back as you wrap it. You want them laying towards the left, the fly, not the right. And you'll see how this gets larger. And then right up here, let's get some of this fluffy, more marabou looking fibers in there as well. And just tie that off. Now that you have your hackle palmered, just go ahead and clip that stem out. Add a couple of wraps. You can throw a half hitch in there. And now we will counter wrap this with that copper wire. When I do this, I just track my hackle, and that tends to keep things from getting trapped if you just follow the same path you just wrapped with your hackle. And if you have fibers that get stuck, just get in there with your bodkin and free them up. It's no big deal. And get that to the right behind the eye. We'll go ahead and tie that wire off. Get it out of the way. So now I have this body. We're gonna move into some rubber legs. We're just using barred, olive, any color is fine, just so that it complements the color of the fly. So tie this in. You could just pull it behind your thread, work it right up to the eye, then secure it. It's real nice and easy. You won't have to worry about tying it in both ways, and you can manipulate it from there with your fingers. You'll get 2 on either side. So do the exact same thing on here. If you have a rotary vise, that definitely helps. Just pull it behind the thread, pinch it here, and tie it in. That gets you a pair on either side. Alright, so once you have these rubber legs tied in, we're going to actually add one more layer of marabou up here on the top. And this is a pretty big fly. If you were tying a smaller sex dungeon, you probably wouldn't need to worry about this, but I like this nice transition here between it all. And I want this to lay a little shorter than my tail. So cut it by, 20% shorter than your tail maybe. And it, as you can see, just creates a nice back to your bait fish. And it also adds more movement to the whole fly. Although this fly doesn't need any extra movement, it's pretty seductive in the water. Half hitch that and clip this out of the way. And we'll get that to lay back just a little bit there. And clean that up, and now you can whip finish it off. Clip it. Hit it with a little head cement, just because these flies can just be a time suck whenever you're whipping them up. You want to make them as durable as possible. So that's the back half of this fly. Now we'll set that aside and grab our 1/0 hook. Again, this is a 2461 Daiichi. And get that in the vise, and we'll start laying a thread base down. Clip the excess. And we'll just go right off the bat. We're gonna tie in some size medium double pupil eyes. I have a nice hot orange here. Yellow would be fine. All, colors do tend to work, but I like this sort of bright hot spot right here. So let's get that tied in about 70% of the way up the hook shank on the bottom. 1, 2, get that loose wraps in there, and then we'll go ahead and crank down on it. And you want them to be nice and centered. Get wrap on either side. All right, and now that's taken care of, we'll go ahead and seat that with some adhesive so that they don't move anywhere. And we'll wind on back. And if you guys like what you see, definitely hit the like button. And if you really like it, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of these videos coming in the future. All right, so now that we have a thread base and our eyes tied in, let's get this tail section. Go ahead and throw side by side your wire. You don't have to worry about it spinning on you or anything. And these hooks will then ride straight to one another. So get a couple of loose wraps over there, and we'll tighten this up right until about the bead starts to hit the bend of that hook. You don't want it to go too much more than that, because then you'll notice that it starts to cock the fly upward. And these glass beads are actually pretty durable. They give a little rattle noise in there, and a nice bit of attracting color as well. So secure that, we'll take this all the way up. All right, so get that tied in. Cut this out of the way. I'm gonna use these big kitchen shears so as to not dull the expensive fly tying scissors. All right, so now that we have our extension tied in, our eyes. All right, and from here, we're gonna cover this up with some marabou. This is where your sort of crappy fibers really tend to shine. All right, so once we get this connected, we're gonna want something to sort of hide this connection point, and you can use a whole marabou plume, but what I do is I just sift through here and find a ratty looking feather. You don't need a really nice one. This isn't like the tail or anything where you need a really select feather. This is a great time to use some of these just worse off feathers from your pack. They're all in there, but this is a real good way to put them to use. So let's leaf through here until we find one. And we're looking for short marabou fibers here, because we're just gonna pull a clump of this off. This one looks good. Yeah, so we're just gonna leaf through here and until I find one that not super high quality and not super long fibers either. It's kind of what we're looking for. It's rare that you need a low quality feather, but this is one of the cases where it gets the job done just fine. So now that we have one, what we're gonna do, we'll get rid of the bottom just because that's a little rough to deal with. Sweep this back, and we're gonna just grab about 1.5 inches off either side. So go ahead and just strip that right off the stem, and then grab it in your opposite hand and pull it together. And you see you have a nice plume here, and we're gonna tie that in on the top of these beads and on the bottom of these beads. And just tie that in, and that is gonna make everything look nice and neat here. Hides that connection, and also completes the profile of a bait fish. Same thing on the bottom. Strip off about 1.5 inches of that, clump it together, put it over our hook like that, and just measure it and tie it right on there. Whoop. All right, get that tied in, and we can cut it now. And we're gonna throw a little flash in here. Again, just this holographic flashabou. I like it to be about the length of the fly, give that lateral line effect. I'm only gonna use one strand, just because like I said, I don't like a whole lot of flash in here, but that is entirely up to you. So if you like a lot of flash, feel free to incorporate that however you like. So now that we have those little connecting marabou points, let's just get started on the body. Get in there with your copper wire, tied in just like we did on the rear. Bring it in and fold it on over for some extra security. Now that we're moving into the front portion of this fly, we're gonna also need a feather to palmer the body with. And for this feather, we're looking for something with those webby characteristics. This could fall into the category of schloppen. It is from a neck, but this neck just so happens to have a lot of these nice webby feathers. So we're going through here, we're gonna find one. We're looking for decent barb length and just a nice webby characteristic to it. So you want it to be bigger to create a nice tapered profile with forward bulk. You want the feather to be webbier and longer, with longer fibers than the one that we chose for the tail. So now that I have my feather chosen, we're gonna just sweep these fibers back and tie it in by the tip. So again, just tie that in right here, about a 45-degree angle. And we'll just wrap it all the way up to continue to build bulk in that body, and I'll even reverse it and put a little more bulk that way. From here, we'll advance our thread right to behind the eye, and we will start to grab some more of this olive ice dub and apply it to our thread, just loosely. And we'll wrap it rearward and then bring it forward just to create a nice bulk in here. Just add dubbing as you need to. It's a little too loose right there. And we'll keep advancing this dubbing and create a nice thick body. And if you guys got a story about this fly, I'm sure at least one of the viewers out there has probably caught a hefty fish on one of these. Feel free to drop that in the comments, or if you have questions, those are always welcome too. Now that you have a nice body, let's just start wrapping this big webby hackle. Nice and evenly spaced. Sweep the feathers backward if you need to. Do one, and we'll do one more full wrap right here, just behind the eyes to add some profile. Pull that upward to really tighten it, and you can snip that off now. All right, and from here, throw some legs into the mix. Put 2 on either side. So grab 2 legs, these barred rubber legs, and size them up. And then just like we did in the back, pull these behind the thread, pull them up, and just tie it right in. See how those lay nicely. And we're gonna do the same on the other side. Pull it behind there. And seat them in. All right, and then one more step before we start spinning some deer is we'll grab one more marabou plume, and we're gonna tie it in on the top just like we did. We're gonna lay this over the back. This sort of ties the minnow profile together and keeps everything without having gaps and steps, and it just creates a natural profile. So again, we'll get rid of the bottom quarter, third of these fibers and see how everything nice and even on the tip. And we'll measure it to come up about 50-55% of the way of that wing that we tied in at the front of the rear extension. Just get that on there. That completes the bait fish profile really well. And right now, what I'm gonna do is grab a straw, it's a drinking straw, cut a slit in it right there, wrap that around your bobbin, and this is a tremendous help whenever you're working with this deer hair. Just pull it parallel, and that way you don't have to worry about cutting something that you just spent quite a while dealing with. So now that we have this fly mostly done. We're gonna get into the hair spinning. We're gonna stack this hair, but we're using deer belly in the color olive. Again, color to match your fly. You could use for this any color that you like, really. This fly has no limits in terms of colors, but we're gonna start with a fairly big stack here of hair. So cut that close to the hide. And then I would say that a hair stacker is crucial at this point in the fly, especially for the first stack that's gonna build that nice collar. So get the shorts and the fuzz out and then stick it in your hair stacker. And we're using a nice large hair stacker. This is a Griffin one. This is great for this application. I would highly recommend using the larger one so you're not stacking multiple bunches, and just makes everything nice and easy. So get that evened, and then you'll see those tips are nice and lined up, and you can just cut it so that it's all even on the end. And we're just gonna stack this right here, and we're gonna make it about 40% of the hook shank. And this GSP really shines here, so spin it to the right and you can crank on this stuff real well. See that flare? And a couple wraps is all you need there. In fact, I hate to say it, but that's a little shorter than I want it to be. So let's lengthen that up just a wee bit. That's perfect. All right, so really crank on that. You'll see it all come together. And I'll just clip this out of the way now. That first stack, probably won't use any of that hair to create the profile, so I'm just gonna trim it down now to get it out of the way. And what I do for this, so that I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm cutting this collar off, I just reverse it and put the cut ends back here. That way, whenever it goes time to trim this head, I know that anything that doesn't have that nice fine point can go. Just sort of a cheat code for making your life easier whenever you're dealing with a lot of deer hair. So go ahead and cinch that. Then we'll advance our thread forward here. We'll stack some bundles on either side. Again, even bunches of hair. Just keep grabbing it about the same size. A little more being on top than the bottom. I won't walk you through it each time. Always get rid of the fuzzies too. Clip that out of the way a little better. And again, I'll put the cut ends facing this collar so I know that those can get trimmed whenever we go to sculpt this head. And again, one right there, flip it over, do another one. So spin your thread if you need to, stack it on the bottom. Oop. One more wrap. I see it flaring. Push that back, and at this point, we don't even need to add another bunch because I use such dense clumps. This is just fine. So weave your thread through those fibers. It always helps me if I bring it to about this point. Right, here's the bottom. Bring it up a couple more degrees to about a 45 and then snake it through. Tends to be easiest for me. So from here, go ahead and whip finish it, but we still have some work to do. It's hard to do with all of these fibers. So what we're gonna do is just cut this out of the way. get in there and sneak a whip finish in. Singe it. All right, we can cut our thread off now. And then we'll work on sculpting this head. If you have one of those collect-all, those catch-all waste baskets, great time to use it because this makes quite a mess. So we're gonna start with the bottom and just get it trimmed straight. Trimming that, you'll see we got a nice big head on this thing. It'll really push water well. It's a great fly for using at night. Those of you guys who are after the really big brown trout at night, it's a good one to do that with. And you'll see I'm just sculpting it upward. A basic minnow shape is what you want. We've all seen bait fish. You know they have a round head. It's a little taller on the top than the bottom. Bottom tends to be a little on the flat side of things. And you can put yourself through the ringer, trimming these fibers, and really drive yourself nuts, but they all tend to catch fish. But if you put the confidence in, it tends to translate to the water too. So now we can pop that straw off. See this thing coming together. Just keep, and a rotary vise really helps here. But you'll see I'm just trimming around the clock until I'm satisfied. All right, and 3.5 hours later, that is a sex dungeon. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.